What's up, friends, and welcome back to Betting Pros. It is the Week 12 early line look-ahead show, and the three best friends that anyone ever had are back. The Wolf Pack is back. I'm Chris Welsh. You can find me on Twitter at @IsItTheWelsh. We got Thor Nystrom, Thor KU. We got Eric Foton, CF Foton, all back in the studio again, ready to break down what seems to be a crazy week, because everything between Week 11 until we're doing this, quote, early show has been crazy. We have got firings. Jimbo Fisher, gone. Urich over at Peen St, gone. Yurkic is gone. We have Avalos in Boise State, gone. Tons of firings, and we are literally we're out there with people waiting to give us information, scouts out there. Breaking news could be abound at any moment, because this is that time of year, Thor, where nobody is safe. Nobody is safe, and there's a lot of craziness over the last 24, 48 hours in college football.
Sure is. Yeah, you said week 12, and it's crazy. We're already here, and yeah, I had to postpone the start of the show by 10 minutes just because all the news that's coming in. You mentioned all the firings that have already happened. Had a whole bunch of injuries yesterday. We're going to talk about a lot of the ways in which both the firings and the interims are the manifestations of that on the lines, and the injuries yesterday, the way that those are going to affect the lines for this coming week. And then also the 6 losses and the bowl eligibility, the teams that are looking for 6 wins, the way that those are going to affect the lines for this coming week. So the lines have just dropped as we record this. The lines are vacillating as we speak. We have a lot to discuss. Excited to get into it.
Yeah, Foton, maybe some we saw, maybe some we didn't see, the surprise on the firings and everything like that. You have any anticipation of what some of this early action is going to do going into Week 12? What type of, line movement, teams playing up for themselves? I mean, there's just a lot of weirdness here. Any anticipation?
Yeah, well, I was actually at the Penn State versus Michigan game yesterday in Happy Valley, and I can say that after that game, it was the temperature around State College, Pennsylvania, was that they were extremely dissatisfied with James Franklin. He's only had one win in his entire tenure against either Ohio State or Michigan. I mean, and that's spanning almost a decade there. He's been there so long. They're married to him, and they didn't have the option of what Texas A&M did, which is say, hey, we're going to eat $76.8 million of Jimbo Fisher's contract, and we're just going to, pump it out of we're going to extract all the black gold out of the ground and put all that oil money towards that contract. It's a much smaller sort of a town and an institution in that sense than Texas A&M. Doesn't have that sort of money. They're married to James Franklin. Hence, you see the rumored firings of Mike Yurcich after that game. There were rumblings, and it came straight away the next morning as we sit here on Sunday. So offensive coordinator Mike Yurcich, formerly of Oklahoma State, was he a product of Mike Gundy, where they had those high-flying offenses of his tenure, comes out and simply it has not been the case at Penn State. Somebody had to be held accountable for these 2 losses and the way the offense looked yesterday, and it was him.
Thor, so we're not going to be covering this game in here, but the three of us were talking off air about the Boise State situation with Avalos and the quarterback. And there's just a lot of stuff that's kind of know what you want to get into with it since we're not doing the full game breakdown. But, you kind of mentioned you want to talk about how these firings and the weirdness that's going on is going to have these big effects on lines and whatnot. The Avalos one was pretty big as well.
Sure was. Yeah. Boise State is traveling to Utah State this coming week. And I don't know how much I'm going to get into, but there's going to be a rash of transfers out of Boise State this offseason. There was going to be either way. The players didn't like Avalos. That was a part of this. It's funny they fired Avalos immediately after they annihilated New Mexico. They had obviously planned to fire Avalos either way. They're still in contention to make a bowl game. So it's funny that they did that. Avalos sort of wrote his own firing, his own pink slip, when he hired Bush Hamdan over the offseason. We had talked about this over the summer. It was a really weird hiring. They hire this sort of dopey pro style, True Blue pro-style offensive coordinator guy who immediately started talking about how we're going to keep Taylon Green in the pocket. We're going to teach him how to be a pro-style guy. We don't want him using his legs and running around and everything like this. Taylon Green, who is one of the most exciting dual-threat quarterbacks in the entire nation, was the most bizarre fit you could ever imagine. And it had the disastrous, consequences that you would think. They immediately end up benching Taylon Green. You just neutered the entire offense that you had, and then they end up going with this Maddox. What's the kid's name? Maddox
Madsen, Mark Madsen.
Maddox,
I'm sure.
Yeah, Maddox.
What a
Maddox.
name.
From
Revolution. Yeah, from Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, we're not going to see Maddox, Mad Dog Madsen going forward, I don't think. And then he gets injured yesterday. Taylon Green was not happy with the whole setup. Taylon Green, I think, is going to be searching for a new address this offseason, along with the running back, Ginty. The receiver, he had already announced that recently. Like I said, you're going to see a rash of that in the offseason. It'll be interesting to see these last two games, how many of those guys end up leaving. That's something with the boy, like in advance of this, or how many maybe guys that they salvage with the news that they got rid of Avalos. There was a lot of guys that were thinking about leaving, in advance of this. Maybe they keep some of those guys for the last two games merely by
like
kicking
that's what they were doing.
The
It seems like what they were doing with that move. Like, you go out and pull that win off, you get him out so you can maybe save face with
for people thinking about betting Boise State, Utah State. Monitor that situation the next 24, 48 hours and the media quotes and the news surrounding that of guys that are staying and leaving. Because I'm telling you, there was a lot of people considering whether entering the portal, what am I doing here? There was already, like I said, already people that were officially leaving and then thinking about leaving and kicking Avalos out the door. I'm suggesting to everybody out there, that was strategic when they did it. Again, right after a blowout win, that was not a coincidence. So take that for what it's worth. And there we have it.
And something just to monitor, I think the main point, all this outside of even just focusing on Boise State, is all of these, pay attention to these fringy teams, these teams that could have a rash of players that are going to hit the transfer portal, offensive coordinators, coaches, whatever it is, being fired. Like there's a lot of volatility, ears to the ground. Make sure you're subscribed to the Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros YouTube channel so you're notified when we do new shows. And you're on the Betting Pros app. Make sure you download that today. When you're following some of your favorite people out here, you're going to be able to see what quick moves Thor makes, or Foton makes, what I make, everybody, not just me, Mike Farrell, everybody, what the moves that they're making. You can get notifications set up because we got volatility in the streets, my friends. We've also got games to break down, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to kick up into the games here going into Saturday, focusing on a lot of the bigger matchups, and obviously there's going to be a lot during the week we can get to. So let's just jump right into how about Michigan. You want to talk about volatility and chaos and everything that they were dealing with. Michigan is going to be battling out Big Ten matchup against Maryland, and Michigan is a 3-touchdown favorite with all the chaos going around Coach Harbaugh. They have not lost, obviously, 21 in Maryland. Thor, what do you think about this matchup? Is this a bet for you for Michigan?
Yeah, yesterday someone asked me what I thought this line would be. I predicted at the open it would be 21.5. It opens at 21. My system's line spit out 18, so a little bit less. I thought there would be inflation on the open to 21.5, but right around there. Michigan impressed the heck out of me yesterday. I ended up staying off of it until the bitter end when, we got the news on the airplane ride over when the Big Ten ambushed Harbaugh. You had the whole thing. It was like a movie, right? When they announced the thing with Harbaugh, that they were fighting it. We're going to try to get Jim on the sideline. Yeah, everybody tweeting out bet. McCarthy tweeted out bet, and then the whole team was. Tom Brady quote tweeted it. You had the bet thing, whatever. Michigan couldn't get the injunction, and then Sharon Moore, ended up coaching them against Penn State. I finally on Saturday morning was like, all right, I'm going to take the points with Penn State now. With all this nonsense swirling around Michigan, the news then that Penn State was getting Chop Robinson was going to be playing. I was finally like, fine, okay, I'm taking those points with Penn State. You're getting nearly a touchdown with them. and Michigan obviously controlled that game, held serve, ends up winning by more than a touchdown. I should have known better. Shame on me. Michigan has been my national title winner pick since June, May. I should have known better than that. This is not one that I'm going to be probably betting on either side of it. This Michigan team is a Goliath. They're the best team in the nation. They will remain my national title pick through the college football playoff. I'm not going to be backing off that one, but this is a non bet for me. And I don't think, by the way, I mean, the only other take I have on this is the Harbaugh thing doesn't matter. The interim coaches thing don't matter. This Michigan team is going to be playing in the college football playoff. And like I said, I'm not backing off my Michigan title pick. They're the best team in the nation. It is going to be a treat to watch this Michigan team that is now wearing the black hat. They are now the villain. It's funny that Georgia, who has won 2 consecutive national titles, and Georgia, which appears they're, now we seen them yesterday, just slapping Mississippi, a really good Mississippi team, just slapping them silly. Georgia gets Brock Bowers back, just annihilating Mississippi. Going to make a 3rd consecutive national title game. They are not the villain in college football, objectively. And they're going to take this Michigan team on. It will be a treat to watch that game. But yeah, no bet for me here. I can't wait to watch Michigan and Georgia in a couple months here.
So Michigan, essentially, in Harbaugh, you either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain. That's what they've done for this season. And they have survived long enough to become the villain, as Harbaugh is pretty good at. Foton, we saw some line movement on this. I think it originally opened a little bit closer to Thor's line. There's some wavering. I think there's some 21.5s that are sitting out there as well. But we've seen a couple points of early line movement on this. Is there a bet for you that you would want to hit on right now with this Michigan-Maryland game?
Yeah, it actually opened -19 on Circa, and that was early on. But quickly on the domestics, it opened at the 21 that Thor is talking about. So there was definitely a disconnect in the marketplace, between the two, the Vegas and the domestic market. Also of note, it opened at 52.5. Along with that -19 on Circa. It is now down to 49.5 on the books. It seems like that's steady between the two domestics. So I actually do like the under for the sheer purpose of it is the game between Penn State and Ohio State, for Michigan. There is a turmoil swirling. Maryland, I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball against Michigan other than their win this past Saturday against Nebraska. They had dropped 4 in a row, including, it had a 5% win expectancy against Northwestern, and not exactly an intimidating team compared to everybody else in the Big Ten. Also dumped to, lost to Illinois, Ohio State and Penn State both smothered, Maryland, had no problems with them. I think it's going to be extremely hard for a limited quarterback in Talia to be able to pass on this Michigan defense. So I think we'll see Michigan, lean on them like they didn't throw a single pass in the entire second half against Penn State. I think you see them lean on them and want to get back to the big house and take on Ohio State.
So do you dig the spread? Are you digging the spread? Like if you had to take a total or
I like the
spread.
under on the total is what I'm saying. I think that's an under.
Okay, so that's your favorite.
49.5 right. Where I'd go.
Okay, there you go. Speaking of Penn State is going to be hosting Rutgers, another Big Ten matchup. Penn State, 19.5 favorite. So they're coming off of this loss. Is this a big blowout type of spot? I mean, this is a pretty big line, Thor. What do you think on Penn State here? What did your system spit out for this matchup?
System says Penn State minus 21.5. I wouldn't necessarily, guarantee that bounce back blowout type spot. Rutgers, they got slapped silly by Iowa last week, but it could be a spot where Rutgers could get back on track as far as being able to get the game closer for them. For Penn State, they're in the spot where their season dreams they ended last week, so it's a deflate spot for them. Whereas Rutgers, their season, like they've already gotten to their bowl game. right? So I mean, it's like, I mean, like they're I mean, like they're still they're going to a bowl game anyway, right? Like, so they're just going to try to do the thing where they keep the game close and whatnot. And I think this game sets up for that anyway. Penn State needs to get back on track, and it might be tough for them to get back off the mat after what happened last week. Firing Urasech, I'm not sure that that's going to pay the immediate dividends that Penn State wants. It feels like he's being offered as the sacrificial lamb when almost assuredly he was not the source of the problems that Franklin and the program is trying to offer him out to be. I don't know if the source of the problems is Alar or if the source of the problem is the recruiting of the receiver position or whatever. Pretty sure it's not Mike Urasech, though. You can just go to the past decade of Mike Urasech's body of work to point to that, right? I mean, there's a reason that they hired him. Again, I'm not sure what's going on there, whether Drew Alar is a bust or whether it's the receiver position, but it's definitely not Mike Urasech. So they have not solved the problem by firing Mike Urasech. I would tend to think that Rutgers is going to be able to keep it within this number, despite the fact that my system is suggesting that there might be a couple points of line value on Penn State. I definitely would not take it here. This is going to be no bet for me early in the week on this one.
Foton, similar to the Michigan one, we're seeing a little bit of line movement around 1.5 to maybe 2 points. Is there a bet that you align with, or is there something that you're going to wait into the week? We're already seeing this go in favor of Penn State. Is this a pure stay away, or is there something we're going to be watching for?
Yeah, it opened at minus 18, actually, on Circa, now up to 19.5. And that's a conspicuous line because Ohio State beat Rutgers 35-16. That's exactly 19 points. So the fact that it crawled over that is kind of a nod to where they think they are. Accordingly, I do think that Ohio State is a much stronger team. Rutgers was able to score 16 points on them. I don't see Penn State being this explosive, and with Rutgers having being good on the offensive and defensive line, despite lackluster passing game efficacy, I do think that they can stay within that number, and I lean towards Rutgers covering the 19.5.
All right, going over those are kind of like the morning-ish games. We jump right into afternoon here. We've got Ohio State hosting Minnesota. Big line, Ohio State 27.5 against Minnesota. Thor, this is big. Is it too big? Not big enough.
This one, I was asked about this one yesterday. I live in Minneapolis. I predicted this one would be 28.5 on the open. So we're just a little bit under that one. My line on this one is Ohio State minus 27.3. My system's line on it. I don't think it's too much. This Minnesota team stinks. I've been saying that all season. They've been able to grind out some wins. It's just a really paint by numbers team, or maybe I more accurately watch paint dry team. All they do is they play super duper slow on offense. They just run the ball every single time. They can't throw, and then they hope that you make mistakes. They don't even really play good defense anymore. They used to. They have a couple good defenders. Newbin, the safety. Lindenberg came back a couple weeks ago. He's good. Outside of that, they don't really have any good singular defenders anymore. Like I said, they used to, but those guys left. Outside of that, they used to have good running backs too earlier this season, but those guys are injured now. Newbin's brother, now he's playing, but he's a young kid. He had one good game a couple weeks ago against Michigan State. I don't know if that'll sustain. In some of these games where they have to throw, Kaliak-Manis is going to throw interceptions. That's what's going to happen in this game. That's where you get concerned with numbers like this. I definitely could not take the points with Minnesota. Flex certainly going to try to stay within this number by just doing the methodical thing and run and try to make this game short. But Ohio State has Harrison. They're going to try to score quickly. I would not take the points of Minnesota in this game.
Foton, how much does Minnesota stink? People have been hammering it since this line opened up. It looks like they're hammering Ohio State right now. So talk to us about where the lines have moved and what your play out of this one might be.
Yeah, the early initial drop was 25 by Circa, and then as Thor mentioned, once the domestic got hold of it, it dropped to 28.5. So that's pretty much an arbitrage dream for anybody who's looking out for that, saying, okay, well, this is why you try to, play both sides of them. To say that Minnesota had a bad weekend is a drastic understatement. They allowed Purdue to run for 353 yards on them, 49-30 loss. And the 30 was, a lot of come up from behind points. Only ran for 115 yards themselves, was relying on, still my beating heart, Ethan Kaliak-Manis's arm. So that is not a way that you're going to beat a Jim Knowles coach defense in Ohio State. I do not feel comfortable. I mean, this is a big line at 28 and a half right now. This is a stay away play for me. 48 and a half on the total. I mean, I don't know how much Minnesota is going to score. I think they're going to be under 10 points. So, I kind of lean under a 38 to 10, maybe, 35 to 10. And then Ohio State gets out and goes to Ann Arbor next week. Similar spot as Michigan and Maryland.
Yeah, they let Minnesota last week. They let that stinky Purdue team that was 2-7 going into that game. They let them put up 49. So like Foton was mentioning, Kaliak-Manis, they had to make him throw. So he ends up attempting 42 passes, only completed 18 of them. He did end up getting the 292 yards just because he attempted 42, but like I said, only completed 18. Fleck is going to be confronted with a really interesting decision with Kaliak-Manis over the offseason because Fleck, his history as a head coach, he sticks with the guys that he recruits, like the 4 years, the 5 years, a lot of times 6 years, sometimes even 7 years. He keeps these kids out of high school. Kaliak-Manis, is he going to be put to a decision? Because really, for the good of the program, he probably should maybe push Kaliak-Manis out the door and go and get a new starter. But we'll see, because that doesn't go with his history as a head coach. Tanner Morgan, previous to that at Western Michigan, it was Zach Terrell. So, I mean, with his history as a head coach, he would keep Kaliak-Manis through to the end. But Gopher fans would probably prefer that he does not.
Oh, Gopher fans. We had a lot of big spreads. Those are some fun games, big rank games, big spreads. We're now hitting an area. It might change, by the way, so don't, burn me for this. But we're hitting an area of all under double-digit lines on these big games. So singular numbers here. This one is teetering. This is the big game. Georgia, Tennessee. 10-0 Georgia, 7-3 Tennessee. Georgia, we got a 9.5 point favorite right now. Obviously, that could move. Thor, what's your system got? And is there something you dig out of this big SEC matchup?
I got Georgia -9 at Tennessee. I got burned last week trying to fade Georgia, taking on Ole Miss, and that one I knew right away. Georgia had no problem at all against Mississippi. Only thing Mississippi did decent in that game, Junkins, he had a okay amount of success. Only element of the game that Mississippi had any amount of success in. Every other element, Georgia had zero issues at all. Like I said, they just slapped him around the whole time. And then Tennessee, speaking of getting slapped around, Missouri had no problems with them whatsoever. Can Tennessee get off the ground here? At least for Tennessee, going back to Knoxville, that's where they play really well. So, I mean, can they, is there any ambush element here for them against Georgia? But Georgia's look like world beaters here. So we'll see on that end of it. Georgia's run defense, like I said, that was only element that Mississippi looked okay at. I think Junkins got to 75 yards or so last time. We'll see. Can that three-headed monster of Tennessee, can they do anything? I don't trust Joe Milton throwing into that Georgia pass defense. No. And if Georgia's offense gets going like you think it's going to, Carson Beck has looked awesome. Now Brock Bowers is back. If Georgia gets up by double digits, and now Heupel's got to say, Joe Milton, we need you. We need you to throw us back into this thing. I think that could spell problems here. I would take Georgia in this one. That's the way I would lean in this game.
All right, Foton, this one opened pretty much where it's at. You've got it at 10. There are a lot of books that do have this number at 10. The best you can find is 9.5. So really what the bottom line is this hasn't really moved. I don't know if people don't want to touch it. People are waiting on it. But what say you? Because there's very little line movement in this game, but is there something that you want to hit early on or something you want to watch for during the week if anything is moving?
Yeah, I think this line, it's just a matter of time before it starts ticking up. The public will get a hold of this as the week goes forward. They start realizing what the destruction that Tennessee just experienced at the hands of Missouri, and it's inevitable. With Carson Beck, ever since his spring game performance this past season, he looked incredible. He won that job after being there for 3 years, waiting his turn behind Stetson Bennett, beat out 2 5-stars in Gunnar Stockton and Brock Vandegrift, and he looked amazing. And he has taken that into the season. I grabbed every single C2C league I'm in. I got Carson Beck in it, made sure to make him a part of my team, 3 for 3, and he has paid off handsomely because I sincerely think he's, in terms of college football right now, he's a top 5 quarterback for this 2024 class, in my estimation. If he's smart enough to stay at Georgia, which I think he will, he is probably the number 1 2025 QB, in my estimation, out of everybody we've seen, because we haven't seen many quarterbacks that are sophomores really distinguish themselves right now. So that's how I feel about Carson Beck. I think he's just incredible. That being said, look at what Georgia's done to the common opponents. I mean, Missouri, Georgia handled them. It was a 9-point victory, but they got a late touchdown and had no problem at all in terms of scoring and moving the ball on them. Cody Schrader has been incredible, and that Missouri run offense really deserves credit. They ran for 205. Cody Schrader did on Tennessee, over 250 yards accumulatively, and were able to just absolutely assert themselves up and down the line. That's bad news against Georgia, because they can go and they can bully you with Dejon Edwards and Kendall Milton, who had a great game, really coming out party for this season last game. But they can also, Carson Beck's going to throw to you. Ladd McConkey's back. Bowers is back. You've got Lovett running the flies. He's pretty explosive. And Ra Thomas. It's all coming together. They are fully operational. Death Star Georgia. And a team like Kentucky, who Tennessee barely squeaked by 33-27, Georgia annihilated 51-3. I just don't think anything as good is coming for Tennessee, despite the fact that they're in Neyland Stadium this Saturday. And Georgia is an absolute smash play. No problem. I already took them.
And I hate to, give bad news to the rest of the nation. Georgia got back Amarius Mims, their starting right tackle, in that game against Ole Miss as well, in addition to Brock Bowers, which allowed them to move the guy who they had shifted to right tackle back to left tackle. The right guard, Tate Rutledge, I guess, is getting back to full health as well for Georgia. They have been playing at less than full strength the past 3-4 weeks. Now they're getting back to full health. So we've been like, oh, Georgia's sort of sleepwalking. Georgia's less than full strength. They're getting back to full strength. Again, I cannot wait until we get to see Georgia against Michigan. It's coming. So get your popcorn ready.
And get your bets ready. Get your bets ready over on the Betting Pros app. Go and download it today, like I mentioned before, iOS or Android. You can follow all your favorite top experts, top-rated bettors, bettors on hot streak. You can get instant notifications, not only from people, but you can set line alerts out there. Maybe you're going to be peaking real hard when that Georgia-Michigan game does go down and you're going to have some line set. Well, you can get notified. It is the most robust app out there, bettingpros.com/app. You can go to the App Store, wherever you do it. Apps, by the way, bettingpros.com/apps. Got to make the plural S at the end. And just go to your favorite app store and you can download the Betting Pros app and get rocking today. Let's go over to the Pac-12. U of A, very surprisingly great year. U of A, who's 7-3, battling against Utah, also a 7-3 matchup. And U of A is a 1.5 point early favorite at home. That is what I see the line at currently here. So let's take a look here, Thor. What do you think on U of A and Utah?
Yeah, got my line on this one. What are you showing live, Welsh? About a pick'em?
I have seen, let's see where it was.
I
am on Betting Pros.
FanDuel is what I had just seen, but opened even on Circa.
I have plus. Yeah. I've got 1.5 on U of A at, it looks like, Caesars, and there are even some evens on a few other spots. So it's wavering between 1.5.
Yeah, definitely depends the book. My sheet's showing a pick 'em. So yeah, just, depending, as we record this early Sunday evening, my system has a line on this one of Utah minus 1.8 at Arizona. Um, Interesting game here. Arizona yesterday, they go to Colorado, have a bit of a letdown performance. Maybe they were, if I may say so, maybe overlooking Coach Prime and Colorado to this game against Utah. A bit bigger of a matchup. Obviously, Colorado had been playing down in recent weeks, whatnot, and Arizona, who had been, they've been on a heater in advance of that game, and this is the big one here, with where Arizona has ascended to. And obviously Utah, where they have been in the Pac-12 pecking order and whatnot. This is the big one right here. Arizona now can establish themselves in the Pac-12 pecking order in the last season of the Pac-12 before both of these teams continue the matter in the future in the Big 12 as they continue things going forward. But an interesting one here. The Arizona, we're going to have to check on the status of Martell Irby, their defensive back. He hurt his left knee in the first half last week, spotted with a knee brace in the second half, against Colorado last week. But yeah, slightest of leans to Utah, just with the line value aspect of it. We'll check on the status of Irby as we go forward. But nothing over over a key number, anything like that. Nothing endemic about the game with Colorado yesterday. I just think it was a bit of a down performance. It was a weird game, as far as that went with Arizona yesterday. I was watching a bit of that. It just, like I said, just seemed like they overlooked Colorado. But I think Arizona's going to get back on the horse a little bit with this one. No bet for me early this week on this one.
So, Foton, similar to what we were talking about here, I'm curious where the early line shows for you, because I see two different books that have two different sides. I've seen the Utah. I think it might have opened up Utah. I think, again, we're doing this very early, but I see DK on Utah, and I see Caesars on U of A, and we're talking a point to a point and a half. So there's just a lot of weird movements, and I think it just purely opened up Utah. So what do you think here? Where's your play? What do you like, if anything? Yeah,
it opened even at circa, and then was Utah -1 last I checked at FanDuel, and like you said, on DraftKings. So the big domestics taking that position, but then, like you said, the secondary books like Caesars coming in and trying to get that action with Arizona -1 and get their own little stake here. When it comes to this game, Utah played Washington pretty damn good this past weekend, lost by a touchdown, but actually, had a 66% win expectancy. A couple of tough turnovers, 2 interceptions by Bryson Barnes in what was statistically probably his best game that he's had. But they didn't assert themselves at all running the ball. You would have expected a little more Jaquindon Jackson out of the Utes, and that didn't happen. He only had 10 carries, 29 yards, only 115 yards total on the ground for Utah, where it was much more of a passing type script where they were kind of trying to keep pace with Washington, who they're gonna score. I'm interested if that's the sort of an identity they'll have against Arizona, where it's a 46.5 over under. That would lead me to believe that we could possibly get a pretty good over situation, and to see where that goes. I think you see that tick up a little bit as the week goes on, given the like you said, Martell Irby, if he's out, what's going to stop Utah and Devon Bailey from going for another $150 and a touchdown here? You could see another shootout coming, and that would be an overscript for me.
Interesting, Thor, your system 46.7 on the total for that game as well. So something to consider in if you're thinking, the play in the over or the under. Thor system 46.7. Do you have a lean, just real quick, Thor? Do you have a lean on the total at all in that game?
Utah is certainly going to try to grind that one. And Arizona, the offense, the last week or two, It seems a little bit off, doesn't it? Like Fafita has been locking in on McMillan. I want to. It's like look at Cowing a little bit more. Like I mean, Foton and I, we love McMillan. Like love. Yes, like love him. Like McMillan's going to be an NFL stud. But it's like the defense knows that you're locking in on McMillan, and we love Fafita. Like and
I like
you know roll forward with Fafita, absolutely. But like Utah is going to know that you are locking in on McMillan. So I mean, like some adjustments are going to be needed there. I guess like. I would probably knee-jerk reaction probably lean under, in terms of this matchup and what I've seen recently from these teams and the prerogative of Utah. If Fafita going to keep playing like that, and some of the injuries with Arizona, the on the offensive side of the ball in recent weeks as well.
Next up, we're going over to the ACC. This is an interesting one. 8-2 North Carolina going up against Clemson, who's 6-4, and Clemson is a full touchdown favorite at home here. Better team. Clemson -7. Thor, what do you think? What is your play, if anything? As I think there is, I'm looking here. I just had it. It looked like some line value into this game, but you know what? I clicked on it, and maybe I don't even know. So you tell me.
God, I hate both these teams, and I hate this conference as a whole. The line value my system showing would be on North Carolina. My line on this game is Clemson -5.3. Yeah. I think I would lean that way. How are you going to lay a touchdown with Clemson's offense? Especially against North Carolina, a team that could easily come through the back door, even if Clemson's controlling the situation. The kind of situation where you want Clemson, it's the one where I stupidly faded them a week or two ago when they were getting points against Notre Dame, right? I mean, like, this is more the situation where you want to go the other way. North Carolina, I feel like would be live. But again, even if Clemson is controlling it, you have the other bullet on that one. Lean for me on North Carolina. Either way that this one plays out, I feel like they're live. Feel like either way the game plays out, they could cover dash win. North Carolina for me.
What do you think about this? This has moved a little bit in that North Carolina betting. It looks like early betting has moved that line in North Carolina's favor. We see multiple points still of value in Thor's system. But what say you?
This actually opened at -8. Now, like you say, it's around 7, just about in terms of the domestics. The 58.5 total is really interesting because, as we know with North Carolina, I mean, they destroy 58.5 every single game. I mean, each of their last 5, it's not even close in terms of what they're doing. Obviously, Clemson is one of the better defenses they're going to face, but I mean, they 42-21 against Georgia Tech. Last game, it's not like that they're just automatic unders anymore, though, 31-23 against Notre Dame. I do think that that's at least worth taking a look at and where that moves. I think it probably ends up ticking up towards about 60, since North Carolina just has a special way about them. I think you'll get some points in this game, and I do lean wanting to take the points, like especially if you can get 7.5. Like, if I can get the hook, give me North Carolina. This has been a real trick or treat Clemson team. I know they're at home and they're just incredible at home, but I mean, if you're getting 7 in the hook, I lean North Carolina on it.
I do see 7 in the hook out there still,
hey,
at least as we're doing this.
Gambling man, so.
Fingers crossed it's still sitting out there. How about some Kansases? How about some 7-3s? That's what we've got. Kansas State versus Kansas. Kansas State, a 7.5-point favorite. Thor, where do you sit on the Kansases?
My line on this one is Kansas State -8.9. In part because I think I baked in a little bit more of an adjustment than the market did, waiting on the quarterback news on the Kansas side. And maybe the market's jumping in a little bit more with more free abandon than I am. Not waiting on news on the Kansas quarterback. News, we'll see. I don't know. Maybe they're not as, maybe they're not waiting on that news. But Jalen Daniels, of course, has been out now for month plus. The QB1 for Kansas started the season as QB1. Mr. Bean, our boy, the QB2 that we love, Jason Bean for Kansas. He had been starting. He'd been playing well. He had spurred the mini renaissance of Kansas, and everything like that. He
nationally ranked Kansas.
Yeah,
under his watch. Hey,
we all love Mr. Bean, and he had led the upset win of Oklahoma and everything like that, and staved off the look ahead spot, or the letdown spot against Iowa State, everything like that. But then he got injured on Saturday against Texas Tech, and was one of the reasons why Kansas ends up losing to Texas Tech. Very close. I credit the coaching staff because they had a shot, Kansas did, at the end to potentially beat Texas Tech. They gave themselves a shot. There was a very weird sequence at the end of that game where the play calling, I won't get into it, but they had a weird play calling sequence at the end of that game where they ended up settling for a field goal. And then at the end of the regulation, they gave Tech a shot to then kick their own field goal to win it at the end of regulation. Kansas loses by a field goal. Whole point is we don't know who is starting for Kansas in this game. It has been left to the imagination whether Jalen Daniels could miraculously return by the end of the season. He has a back issue. Purportedly, a nerve could be involved. Jalen Daniels has suggested he could come back by the end of the season, which we don't know. But last season, the Lawrence Journal World, I'll return people to last year on this. The Lawrence Journal World had reported last year Jalen Daniels is done for the season. Jalen Daniels had then been like, where are you getting this information? And then Jalen Daniels did return. So for people who are like, no, Jalen Daniels done for this season, forget about him. You do have to remember that. So it is in play that Jalen Daniels could return. We also don't know Mr. Bean's status. He the head injury, whatever he suffered yesterday. We don't have a ton of information about that now. The Cole Ballard kid who came in yesterday did not look great. The Kansas coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball is one of the better ones in the nation at scheming stuff up. They do all the pre-snap motion and the misdirection and different stuff like that. They get inside the defenders' heads and everything like that. I've referred to it as hide the ball under the cup and different stuff like that. They do a really good job of facilitating things for the quarterback, setting them up and different stuff like that. But the Cole Ballard kid is not good. So now you have to play Kansas State. So that could be an issue here. You need to monitor that. Kansas could really use either the miraculous return of Daniels, or they could use Mr. Bean. Short story long on that whole situation. You do not want Ballard if you're buying a Kansas ticket. Certainly if you're only getting single digits. I'm waiting on that news before I'm going to bet on Kansas. That is my story on this one, and I'm sticking to it.
It's the same thing real quick because I want to take this to Foton, but one thing that stands out is your total. The total line that your system dropped was 68.9, and the line is in the 50s. Is that do you think that's Jalen Daniels baked, Mr. Bean baked? Like, how is this baked in? Should we wait for the quarterback before touching? Because there is massive line value based on what is out there to your system on the total. Do we want to wait on the quarterback before touching that?
It feels like the total is more baking in the idea that you could have a potential Ballard situation, right?
The public total, not your total.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what I was asking. Yes, your total seems like it's more Jalen Daniels or maybe Bean focused, where the public one is on the opposite.
That's correct. The opening total that was dropped by Vegas seemed to be more nodding at the idea that Ballard potentially could be starting for Kansas, whereas of course mine is not. That's in the vacuum of whether it's Bean or Daniels, and then of course a full strength Kansas State. Whereas the line is not, right. Like the Vegas line that dropped it's like both offenses are, full strength or whatever. So it's kind of interesting how they did that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, potentially you could get value on the one side, if you wanted to bet it on different sides and then try to get value, because one of them's going to drop depending on, or go the other way, depending on the way that this news goes. Because you can't have it both ways, depending on the way that this line goes. And we don't know how this is going to go with the way that the Kansas quarterback news goes.
Very interesting. That's a very interesting approach to it as well. So, Foton, I wanted to set up the Thor adjusted line when you talked about the total, because I think we've also not only seen the spread move a tiny bit, but the totals move down, kind of anticipating that quarterback play. So what do you think? What are you going to attack or potentially be looking for this week if you're going to bet this game?
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty obvious. It's the quarterback situation, but I don't have the quite the faith. I know that Thor wants to keep the faith. I'm very suspect as to whether or not he'll come back. And gosh, it's Kansas State. And with the exception of their loss to Texas, I mean, they have been smashing teams. They haven't been just winning. They've been destroying their recent opponents. Baylor, 34-point win. Houston, 41. TCU, 38. Texas Tech, on the road in Lubbock, 17. So they're convincingly taking out everybody except for a pretty good Texas team. It's hard for me to go against Kansas State. I think this line is destined to climb closer to that 10, probably even over it. I think it's a good idea to take a position on Kansas State right now with the understanding it's probably climbing over that key number, and then maybe you can hedge.
Hey, Foton, what were you doing on November 1st, 2008?
I was probably playing Todd Reesing in my college fantasy football thing because I had Todd Reesing. Oh, this is.
I was in Memorial Stadium when Rock Chalk beat Kansas State 52-21 and sent Josh Freeman back to the Little Apple. 52-21, baby.
Remember when he was the apple of everyone's eye for Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Brought him to
I was just thinking the same thing.
Playoffs. My gosh.
Tampa Bay might love to have him back.
Good time.
They might want him game cup of coffee for the Vikes.
Nice.
Yeah. Little known fact. Wow. I think it was like Thursday night football game, or it was like something. They brought him in for like one game.
Wow. Maybe Kellen Mond will have the same fate.
Yeah. Oh, we're just going to all of them. All right. We got two more here. Yeah. We've got some more Pac-12. We've got Washington, undefeated Washington, going up against Oregon State, who's 8-2. Let's see. I just went away from what my sheet has. My sheet, we've got Oregon. Actually, this was the interesting one where I just saw a complete balance between an even line and plus 1.5, or I should say minus 1.5 on Washington's side. So it's kind of bounced around there. So Thor, what do you think? This is a powerhouse team. Washington has definitely been a play, but like I said, Caesars has got an even line on Washington where you can get minus 1.5 all the way up to minus 1.5 on FanDuel if you wanted to bet Washington. But what do you want to bet?
It's a fun game. It's a really fun game. Yeah, because you have the confluence of several different factors coalescing in one evening in Corvallis. First of all, Oregon State, a team that we talked about for months now, that is the antidote to all these high-flying Pac-12 offenses, right? And Oregon State, a team that we talked about, plays way better in Corvallis, right? So this is their shot to take a swing and take out one of the Pac-12 title contenders, and specifically the 10-0 one, right? Like let's take a shot, and more specifically the 10-0 one that's leaving the conference, right? The jilted lover. Come on down, come to Corvallis, and we're going to take a swing and try to knock you out right now on the precipice of the end of this season on November, whatever day this was, 16th or whatever, right at the end of the last month of the regular season here. My line on this game is right where the market is. I'm showing Washington -1. My system's line on this is Washington -1.1. I'm right there. Washington, meanwhile, as you guys know, even though they're 10-0, they have been playing down the last, month, 3 to 4 weeks, right? I mean, they've been playing with fire each and every single week here. Penix has not been playing like he has the first month, this past month. And Oregon State's defense, the pass defense is better than the run defense. Dylan Johnson, on the other hand, has been playing really well. That Mississippi State transfer lit up USC. He played really well last week as well. I think Dylan Johnson's going to have a bit of success against this Oregon State run defense. Oregon State's run defense has been worse this year than it was last year. Oregon State lost that linebacker to LSU. Maybe that linebacker wishes that he could reverse course and go back. LSU defense has not been very good. But the Oregon State pass defense had been better than the run defense. So that's going to be an interesting matchup in this one. Can they suppress that Washington passing offense? This one is going to be very, very fun. You have a kickoff of this one at 7:30 Eastern. The eyes of the nation are going to be on this one. There are so many interested parties that eyes glued to the television screen, because if Oregon State can win this one, potentially knock Washington either out of the playoffs or right on the precipice of it, where then one more loss, of course, would knock them clear out of it, in the Pac-12 title game against Oregon, whatever, would make that a true eliminator one. For me, right now, this is a non-bet early in the week. This is one I'm going to be handicapping super duper hard during the week because it's a very interesting one where this one could go either way. But Oregon State plays so well at home, and Washington has been playing down, that I'm going to try to see if I can find an angle of this one during the week. I am interested in Oregon State here a little bit, so I'm going to see if I can find anything in this one during the week.
Foton, do you have an angle that you want to hit right now, or something you're going to be looking for in this game?
Yeah, well, in terms of the opening, it opened -2 on Circa to Washington's side. So we've seen that come down just a little bit. And 66.5 on the total, down to 63.5 right now, maybe even 63 in some places, which is a little bit interesting. It speaks to the efficacy of Oregon State in Corvallis, to where the market is a little nervous. Usually you get the big wagon of the undefeated team, but Washington's been flirting with a potential defeat. We saw them. It was pretty much a coin flip against Oregon. Following week against Arizona State, I was on the field for that after sailgating at Husky Stadium in Washington, and they needed a pick six going the other way from the defense in order to even, give themselves a cushion in that game. They were down for 3.5 quarters against Arizona State. And then this past week, 34% win expectancy against Utah, where they need some turnovers to really put this game away. Against a team like Oregon State, Jonathan Smith coached, punishing ground game with Damian Martinez, Gold and Silas Bolden, a couple of good wide receivers, and DJU on his revival tour after, leaving Clemson in shambles. Like, the storylines are all lined up for this sort of game to be a magical moment. I have to lean Washington, but man, you don't feel good about it. I don't feel like I can take a strong position on this, but it should be a great game.
All right, last one here. Let's just get some quick analysis on this bad boy. Didn't want to walk out with talking about Texas and Iowa State. We've got a 8-point spread right now in favor of Texas, but there's even again, Caesar seems to be doing some other stuff because they've got around 9.5, so you can get plus 9.5 on Iowa State. So if you're over on Betting Pros on the website, Betting Pros, you can check the odds. It'll tell you the odds of all the books. There is a 1.5 difference between books early on in this game. Thor, quick analysis on Iowa State, Texas, if there's a bet for you.
So my line's Texas minus 9.5, but we do have to mention Jonathan Brooks tore his ACL yesterday. The breakout star of the Texas Longhorns this year, their star running back. Heading into this year, we didn't even know Jonathan Brooks was going to be the running back that took over for Bijan and took over for Roshan, right? Texas had the star-studded backfield last year, and then they had the couple 5-star young kids that, was part of the competition. Jonathan Brooks was sort of viewed and forwarded as the uninspiring veteran. Jonathan Brooks then in camp steals the job and then turned out to be this mega stud. He was, I believe, Mel Kiper's number 1 running back. I think he was maybe Brugler's number 2 or number 1. Somebody certainly was in the top 2. But the NFL, he was the apple of the NFL's eye, one way or the other. He's going to be one of the top couple running backs drafted. Really unfortunate news, both for Jonathan Brooks singularly, was certainly going to be leaving for the NFL after this year. Now we're going to have to wait for news on that, but also for Texas in particular, right? I mean, like for the rest of this season, their offense now is going to have to make some alterations. Certainly they're going to be going from Brooks now to those aforementioned 5-star guys. You're going to see a platoon here. Quinn Ewers had just gotten back into the lineup from his own injury. He had returned against TCU, takes back over for Malik Murphy, who started the previous 2 games. Ewers looked pretty solid in his return from his ACL, his throwing shoulder deal or whatever. So at least you had that going for you. But again, like they had this explosive running element now, and now you got to pick up the pieces with that. Now you're probably going to be going more to a throwing heavy deal, throwing downfield more than you were doing before. So Steve Sarkisian going to be earning his paycheck down the stretch here as he tries to reconstitute this offense, and Texas tries to salvage things going forward. So that's on the Texas side of things. As far as this game, just because of all this, now facing this Iowa State team that just coming off just decking BYU, that fraudulent BYU team.
They're terrible.
Terrible BYU team. And now Texas, you again, this reconstituted offense, picking up the pieces. Now you have to go to Ames, Iowa on a Saturday night. Texas, who just went to Fort Worth, TCU, we had talked about how bad that spot was. Texas, historically, they always don't cover against TCU. Nobody covers in Ames at night. I don't expect Texas to cover against, in Ames. I'm not going to say they're going to get ambushed here, but this is a spot where a lot of teams get ambushed. So Texas got to be very careful here. I would lean Iowa State in this spot.
Foton, what about you? All right, where's your lean?
Yeah, with Iowa State, they've lost to the teams that are the better teams in their schedule. You see them against Oklahoma, pretty sound loss. Kansas, they took an L to them as well. Iowa, another one of their losses. But against the lower rung teams, the TCU, Cincinnati, Baylor, BYU, they have held serve. The problem is they're playing Texas. And even though Jonathan Brooks is down, and obviously, that's too bad, and that's a blow to their run game, Quinn Ewers is back, and, CJ Baxter is the number 1 2025 running back recruit in the country. He looked great in terms of the understudy role he'd been in. It's luckily far enough along in the season where he's got his feet wet and he's ready to go. I mean, he should be in good shape. I do think they'll be able to function. And with Iowa State, like I said, it feels to me like I don't feel comfortable taking Iowa State. I'd want it as close to 7 as I could get, leaning Texas, simply for the fact that they have handled business and done it pretty well. Even against, Kansas State was a tough game, handled Alabama. It's just that Oklahoma game, that was pretty much a coin flip that they lost. I think they're going to be in good shape and handle Iowa State here. They want to get to the Big 12 championship and avenge that loss. So I got to lean Texas.
Follow all the bets all week long. Couple ways you can do it. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel right here, youtube.com/bettingpros. Wednesdays, I think, is when we end up recording on Tuesday. They drop on Wednesday. You can get Mike Farrell, Thor Nystrom, and Scott Bogman breaking down the card for the week. On Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern, you can get the live show where Thor and Mike are just hammering it out with everything that you got, getting you prepped. And if the shows just don't do it for you enough, is what I mean, go download the app, Betting Pros. You can follow these guys, track all their bets all week long, and tons more. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. We got you prepped for week 12, so let's get it in, and we'll talk to you right here on Betting Pros. Bye, friends.